Right, so today I wanted to talk about an interesting tweet I seen here from Real Jeff 45 on Twitter saying the most underappreciated people in Canada by far are the Europeans that came over in the early 20th century. All we ever hear about is Indigenous, Muslim, people of color, etc. The Europeans settled here, built this country into what it is today, and get zero credit for it. And again, this is something I've talked about before, but it should be talked about more. It's not something we're really taught about in schools. We're taught, kind of about it, but we're taught a lot of lies, half truths, and I think just a lot of times lies by omission. In a lot of the stuff we're taught about, the natives and stuff. I mean, a lot of it's true to be fair, but a lot of it isn't. Like the natives were these noble savages, and they're so peaceful, and which is complete garbage, right? The natives routinely killed large amounts of people. They would rape they would rape the female victims of the other tribes. They would take the men as slaves. They would there was they had the I mean, a good way of putting it is they had their fair share of crazy stuff, right? They had their easily had their fair share of crazy stuff. I mean, there's been graves of like thousands of skulls, that predate, Europeans coming to North America, that have been found of natives obviously killing other natives, right? So the idea that natives were, oh, they're so peaceful and all this stuff is complete garbage. Right? It's complete garbage. Now, there is some definitely that were, but the idea that they were so peaceful, at least compared to Europeans, isn't necessarily true. I mean, same thing goes for the Muslims, right? The Muslims, oh, they're the religion of peace, which is again is complete garbage, right? It's complete garbage. They spent what, how many hundreds of years trying to get into Europe? Like again, like, and not to mention, too, look at how violent they still are to this day. So again, the idea of that is it's just garbage. Now, the reality behind it is it's just white hatred, and it's partly racism, partly, but the big thing I think it is white Europeans are the group of people that are the most conservative out there, right? The reason why they never criticize the Muslims and the natives and the blacks and all this is that they're groups of people that are leftists on average, right? They're leftists, right? The all this criticism geared towards Europeans, it's almost exclusively coming from leftists, right? It's almost exclusively, even though some of them are white people, right? Even though a lot of them are actually, but the reality is that it's a political thing as much as it is a race thing, I think. And this is the other reason why the left always accuses the right of being racist, is that it's really them that are the racists, right? It's really them that are the racists. Number one, if you look back at history, it was them that was the racists. Um, Number two is that it's still them that are racist to this day. And one of the left's caricatures is they always, oh, it's always, you always got to accuse the other side of what you're yourself are doing, to keep so they don't get to mount a defense, right? It's always putting them on the defensive rather than them on the offensive, right? So that's why they do that kind of stuff. But again, this is something that I don't understand. I mean, I do understand it's because the far left doesn't like it, but the vast majority of inventions were made by white Europeans. Like the vast majority, of advances in science were made by white Europeans, right? I mean, you look back at some of these other cultures. I mean, look at how technologically inferior the natives were when the Europeans came. I mean, look at how technologically inferior they were in Africa. I mean, they had two-story buildings in Europe for like over 1,000 years before they did in Africa. Right? They barely even had the wheel when the Europeans just came to Africa. It's just very astounding that this is what we're taught about history, when again the majority of the lies that are told are lies by omission, right? They're lies by omission. That they're not necessarily directly lying to you, but they're lying to you or misleading you in the fact that they're not telling you the whole story, or they just don't even tell you the story to begin with because it would contradict their worldview, right? So this is something that I think should be talked about a lot more. It should be taught about in schools a lot more, but again, it's never going to happen because again, schools are run by leftists, a lot of times far leftists, and they're never going to talk about that. Like they're never going to talk about that. And like I brought up, the reason why they do it's mainly a political thing. Like it's mainly a political thing because they want to push their far left ideology, and the way that they do that again is by criticizing, is by being heavily critical and overly critical and unfairly critical of people that disagree with them. Right? It's the same thing that goes with slavery, right? That whenever the average person, you say the word slavery, what does the average person think of? It's the black slaves in the south of the U.S., right? It's the slaves in America. But that's just the proof of the propaganda that's been put out there, because slavery in the States went on for a much shorter period of time and on a much smaller scale than slavery did in the Middle East, for example, right? Much smaller time. And not to mention too, the slavery in the States was not that again any form of slavery is okay, but it was far more bearable than the slavery in the Middle East. Because again, the slavery in the Middle East, I mean, they would castrate the men, right? They would castrate you. Like again, that's a little bit better than, I mean, the slavery in the States, at least they got to keep some of what they produced. They weren't castrated either. So again, the slavery in the States, again, it was in a much smaller scale for a much shorter period of time, and it was much more bearable for the slaves, right? And slavery still goes on in a lot of African and Middle Eastern countries, right? And this is the other thing that's never brought up too, is that the concept of slavery was ended because of white Europeans, right? It was ended by, it wasn't Africans that were doing it. It wasn't Middle Easterners. Right? That's not the actual way of putting it, but you know what I mean, right? So again, why is this not brought up more? Well, again, like I brought up, is that it's simply, you have to hate the people that disagree with you politically. It is just that simple, right? It is just that simple. So like I say, I think he makes a very good point. I think he makes a very good point, and it's something that we should be taught a lot more. Like I said, the vast majority of inventions like I say, of these, the telephone, electricity, running water, all this kind of stuff. It was Europeans, right? It wasn't Africans. It wasn't Muslims. It wasn't any of these kind of people. Not that they didn't make anything. I'm sure they made some relevant inventions, but again, same thing goes for, like I said, scientific advances. Again, I think it's like 95% of major scientific breakthroughs were done by, white, people of European descent. And again, why is that not talked about more? Again, like I say, it's entirely a political thing, and this is why I bring this stuff up so much, because again, it it is a failure of the public school system. It's a failure of the mainstream media. And again, this is one of the big reasons why I'm so critical of these organizations and these groups, is because they are doing a very good job at destroying society and sowing a lot of mistrust in society for no reason, right? For no reason. Like this hatred of the other is something that's caused by the mainstream media and of public schools and all this kind of stuff, because again, they're teaching people lies. Like they're teaching people lies, like I said, like smallpox blankets and all this stuff. The Europeans were so terrible to the natives, which they were to an extent. Like I say, that's definitely true to an extent. But if you have to bring up the smallpox blankets and stuff like that, which is again is a complete lie, because again the concept of germ theory hadn't even been discovered yet. So again, that's a complete lie. Again, if things were so bad, like I say, which I would acknowledge they were, but again, if they were as bad as what they would have you think, then they wouldn't have to make up these falsehoods as a piece of evidence to back up what they're trying to say, right? So yeah, that's what I wanted to bring up today. Like I say, I think it's a very important thing that really not a lot of people know of. Like really not a lot of people know of. And again, a lot of people believe these just outright blatant lies, or at the very least, lies by omission, right? Lies by omission, I think, like I brought up before, it's one of the most common ways that we're lied to. In fact, I think it is the most common way we're lied to in society by the mainstream media and by public schools and all this kind of stuff, is that we are not taught the whole story, or in a lot of cases, we're not even taught the other side of the story at all. Like it's not even brought up. Um, so anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out those links below. Follow me in those other platforms. Again, very important that you do that stuff. It's only a matter of time till YouTube bans me. So check me out on those other platforms as well. If you want to donate, you can do that as well. Again, I appreciate whatever support I can get. But like I say, check out those links. Stay tuned for more, and have a good day.